from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Well, Joanna, I have now been in Seattle for over 3 weeks, and I have to confess I cannot stop taking photographs of Mount Rainier in every different light and weather, and also moss. For some reason, they have the wildest moss you've ever seen, and I just have to take pictures of it. It's beautiful.
That's so exciting for you, David. And as gorgeous as Seattle is, I think I'm most excited that you're going to experience the people there. There are some top-notch pediatricians out west.
Oh, I know that you have some great friends on the West Coast, Joanna, so please introduce me to some.
Well, David, if you have time now, we can learn a lot about a pediatrician in Seattle who has worked in many settings, the hospital, a federally qualified health center, a private practice, and has set up a community clinic focused on health equity.
Wait, is this a Pathways episode where we get to interview a pediatrician and find out how they got to and through pediatrics? I'm excited. Who do we get to interview today?
Dr. Peter Asante. Dr. Asante is a primary care pediatrician working at Mary Bridge Children's Pediatrics, Auburn, and Mary Bridge Children's Adolescent Center in Tacoma, and he has been recognized nationally by the AAP for his innovative work in advocacy and adolescent health, and is passionate about how healthcare is delivered to communities in need. Dr. Asante, welcome to the show.
Hi, y'all. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I should also mention that Peter and I went to college together, David.
Oh, okay.
So I'm introducing you to a best friend.
Yes. On with the shenanigans. I don't know how the other ones have gone, but this one will be a ride for the listeners.
So you live in Seattle now, but I understand you grew up on the East Coast with strong family roots in West Africa. What was it like growing up in Rhode Island with parents who immigrated to the United States from Ghana?
Yeah, it's part of an interesting story that I don't get to tell. And first, thank you guys so much for having me. I mean, this is going to be really, really fun, but I'm also excited to share a little bit more about my story. So I grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, affectionately known as the Bucket. And I also like to say that it's the smallest state with the most attitude. So don't try us, we'll find you. But I actually spent my earliest childhood memories in Ghana. So I was born in the US, but between ages 3 and 6, I lived in Ghana and then came to the US when I was 6. And I have a twin brother and 2 younger brothers. And so what I remember was arriving in a new country, not knowing how to speak the language, having to go to school within weeks of arriving, and also sort of learn to get accustomed to a life that was dramatically different from how I was raised in my earlier years. What I remember was, I lived in the house with my mom's dad, my grandmother. And we had a large house and a large compound, and we played outside and got into all kinds of trouble. And then I come to the US and then everybody's inside. And I was like, what is going on here? And the idea of you couldn't just go out and play on the street. You couldn't just go and meet your neighbors in the same way that you could in my earlier childhood years where I grew up was really different for me. And then the experience of school was also different because I think it's when I learned that I was other. And living in a country where we all sort of see each other and we are in community with each other, and then you arrive in a new country and then you are othered was a really interesting experience. And, that sort of has set me on quite a journey of learning more about who I am as a person, who I am as a West African and a first-generation American, as well as who I am as a Black person in America in this space.
And I know something that's been a part of your life forever is singing. I know that it's something that's got you through this feeling of otherness, but also is something that you're still engaged in, even though you are a very busy pediatrician. Can you talk to us a little bit about how singing helped you with your transition to this country?
Yeah, so I started singing when I was 7 years old. I probably sang before then, but that's what I remember. And I started singing in the church. We went to church every Sunday. I learned all of my best dressed category wins and items from church. And, being able to sort of be in that space and then learn to sing in that space, it was a very formative time of my life. I then continued to sing through high school and actually found theater really in late elementary school, but found theater as a way to really express myself. And in high school, did all of the shows and all the plays, and then found college a cappella my freshman year. Technically, it started my senior year of high school, but I attribute going to college as where my singing career really flourished. And did that for 4 years, as Joanna knows, with the Harvard Radcliffe Baritones. And in fact, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary. So it's really crazy to sort of come full circle in this moment where like music has just been such a formative part of, self-expression and therapy and a way for me to find my own voice and then use performance as a way to really share that gift with the world. And I continue to do it now really as a way to stay in my body. I mean, I think music has really been an important source of comfort for me, particularly in some of the most challenging times of my life. And even when I was a child, I had a very chaotic home life as a young person. And to be able to know that like every Sunday I could go to church and I could sing with my friends and I would have rehearsal after church, that really became something that was a constant in my life and became consistent as a source of joy. And so I continue to sing now really, for that, right? It's fun. It's fun for me to learn to use my voice. And it is fun for me to learn to use my voice differently and smarter as I get older and continue to share that gift with the world. In fact, I still perform, which is really exciting. And I had a recital just about a month ago. And so, yeah, it's been a great art that I get to hold within myself and then share within others too.
Well, Peter, now that I'm in Seattle, I'm going to come listen to you perform, but I might also be admitting some of your patients. And that brings up the question, when did you know that you wanted to become a doctor? And did you have any other doctors in your family that you looked up to?
Yeah, this is a really wild story because I didn't start out wanting to be a doctor. So when I was younger, a lot of my family members used to say that I looked like my Uncle Edmund, who passed a couple years ago. And they would say that because he was a doctor. They're like, well, you look just like him, so you're going to become a doctor someday. And I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. And I come mainly from an engineering family. And so actually what people should know is that my mom's youngest brother was a doctor and a reverend. So my mom is a veterinarian, and she actually studied to become a veterinarian in the former Yugoslavia, actually arriving in Yugoslavia, not knowing any of the language and learning Serbian, and then becoming a veterinarian. But when I was growing up, I didn't really know much actually about the healthcare field. I mean, I went to my well visits annually, I got my vaccines, but there was no real interaction that I had. And so I actually went to college thinking I was going to become an electrical engineer. And that was because I was very good at physics. But one thing I learned very quickly is that just because you're good at something doesn't mean you love it. And if it starts to challenge you and you only like something because you're good at it, it probably means that that's not where you're supposed to be. And let me tell you, freshman year physics ate me alive. The multivariate differentials of it all said, absolutely not, honey, find something else to do. And so it was interesting because I was part of an organization called the Harvard Society for Black Scientists and Engineers. And they had a community luncheon. I will never forget it. And I'm sitting down talking to the electrical engineer, and not his fault, all mine, but he was boring. And I was just like, there has to be more interesting things to do in I don't know, the health, engineering, science sphere. Like, what is going on here? And this person doesn't know this, but there is a doctor. Her name is Ariaha Spinks. She is within the AAP. She was actually at that luncheon. And I just happened to turn my ear and I was listening to all the amazing things that she was doing. And I was like, that's cool. Like, I want to do that. And, another thing about me is that I have never held a job outside of working with young people. And so every job I had, I was a camp counselor, I was a Sunday school teacher. Like, I've never worked retail. I would not be good at it. I can wear the gowns, but I should not be selling the gowns. And I've never done anything in food service or anything like that. Like, I've always worked with children. And so on that day, while hearing her talk about all the amazing things that she is doing with people and with young people, that is the day I called my mom and my godmother and I said, I think I'm going to be a doctor. And that just sent me on this crazy journey to where I am now. And at the time, I also knew that I would not be a doctor if I couldn't work with young people. That was like a decision I made in that moment. And while I was interested in a lot of different things in medical school, whether it was women's health or adolescent health, sexual and reproductive health, family medicine, OBGYN, like I kept coming back to pediatrics because kids are cute, first of all, and they're messy, but I love a good drama. And I love being able to really interact with young people and hear about what's going on in their lives and be of use and be of help in that space. And so that's sort of how I got to this decision and this path that I'm on right now.
But I know you didn't go to med school right away after you graduated college. You spent some time in New York as a social worker. Why did you take that job, and how did it inform your work as a pediatrician later on?
I thought at the time that I was graduating from college that I wanted to know how to pay bills. Truly, I wanted to know how to pay bills. And I wanted to understand how to be a grown up. And I wanted to live as a grown up, like in my personhood before I went to medical school. And part of the decision to become a social worker was really interesting because I actually had another job at the time that I was graduating from college to work in clinical research for a pharmaceutical company. And I thought that was what I was going to do. But another thing I've really learned about myself is that when something really doesn't feel right in my body, I really need to pay attention to that. And so while I had the job, I actually kept applying. And the job I ended up taking was the very last job I interviewed for. It was to be a Medicaid service coordinator for kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities and to help them apply for waiver services in New York. And I got to live and work in the Bronx. And the thing that was really exciting about that job was just the conversations I got to have with people, but then also to be able to help people. So, my major in college was biological and medical anthropology. And I really love thinking about how systems could effectively help people. And that if it says it's going to help people, what are the unintended consequences of the system that has been set up to potentially help people? And so to work in the Medicaid space was really interesting because I was helping people apply for Medicaid and then apply for services and learning all the ways in which the system did not help people in that moment. And I was working with a lot of Black and brown families in the Bronx, but more to the point, understanding my privilege in the space that I was to be able to help people and build relationships on the other end that could support the services that people deserved. That is sort of like where my true advocacy, skill was really formulated. And then it sort of germinated from there. And I'm so grateful that I took that job because it is because of that I think every space I walk into, I really try to figure out what are my resources and what relationships are important to build such that I can bring those resources to the population that I'm in service to.
So the population that you ended up serving once you became a pediatrician was based at a federally qualified health center in rural Washington state. How do you get from Harvard to rural Washington state? What happened?
This is a series of just paying attention to the next right thing. I love Frozen and Frozen 2 a lot. And there's a great song in Frozen 2 about the next right thing.
Can you sing the line, Peter? You are a singer.
Girl, I'm not going to sing the line. That's not what we're doing.
Do it? Okay.
I'm actually a show yourself girl, and you know this. I'm dying to meet you is what the line is. And I'm also dying to meet my future self. But, in residency, I was really interested in a lot of different things. Interested in a lot of different things to the point of I really liked adolescent health. I really liked chronic care. I really liked primary care. And in all of those spaces, it is really about continuity. And I actually came so close to doing a fellowship that actually my mentors know this. I almost applied for a double fellowship in adolescent medicine and nephrology because I'm a nerd. You wouldn't know it, but I actually really liked the kidney. And so I thought that I was going to do that. But I also really love the adolescent population. And so I thought I would find a way to sort of merge, this group of people, adolescents, that really, I think, gets overlooked a lot in the healthcare space, but like focus it very specifically in this chronic care space. And so I had a really pivotal conversation with two mentors at the time. And it was right before I was doing this rotation called the WWAMI rotation through the Seattle Children's Pediatric Residency, where basically, second year residents are put in rural areas and they function as a primary care pediatrician like anybody else in that practice. So if that practice is on a call rotation, you take call. If they are seeing patients on their own panel, you see patients on your own panel. And one thing that I remembered around that time was that in my medical school essay, one of the things that I had said was, I really want to become a doctor to become as good as I can be at medicine and bring that back to the people that I want to serve. And I want to do that in a community. And Yakima was actually my placement for my WWAMI rotation. And so at the end of my second year, I go to do this 2-month rotation. I had no expectations. And I think that that's the other part of my life that I think has always been really interesting is usually in places where I show up with no expectations is the place where I learn something so profoundly important about myself that I'm therefore able to sort of take the next step to do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And so when I think of, medicine and healthcare being a part of my ancestral assignment, it is really just sort of following, like, what is the next thing that we're doing, which was to be in this place, to be as good as a doctor as I wanted to be, to do that in community. And at the end of those 2 months, I was handed a contract and I was like, girl, I'm not even done with residency. Like, what are you talking about? And that was really humbling because I don't think up until that point I'd ever thought that I had that kind of skill to be able to sort of make that kind of impact. But I'd known that by the time I finished my rotation, I'd made a significant impact in that community and that community had also made an impact on me. And one of the things that I said at the time of that conversation with one of my mentors is I said, I'm really passionate about adolescent health and I want to be able to do work in this space in addition to being a primary care physician. And I have this idea in my mind that we can do comprehensive and complex adolescent care within the primary care space. Will you allow me to do that? And the response was, well, what is your vision? And up until that point, even though I said that over and over again to other friends, colleagues, mentors, I had never been met with that question. And it was a particularly powerful question because up until that point, it was, no, you can't do that. The infrastructure doesn't allow it. This is not how we do things. Well, they can just go to a specialist. And I kept doubling down on this idea that we can do very hard things in primary care. We do hard things in primary care. And while I understand that there is a space for specialty care, the continuity needs to exist between primary care and specialty care. And in a resource poor setting, what does it look like if we are the resource, not the specialist that it's going to take 3.5 hours for our families to get to over a mountain pass in the middle of winter, and they're not going to make it because their car cannot take them there. And so that is actually why I ended up in Yakima, was to challenge myself in terms of if this is a vision that I have, how can I actually bring this to life? How can I put myself in this space to say, okay, this is something I've always wanted to do. This is an opportunity for me to be able to do that thing. And what does it look like if it works or it doesn't work? And really the work at Yakima was just, I don't know, I liked it. People ask me why do I do stuff, but I usually say because I wanted to, because it was fun. And the practice I was working with was really fun. I'm really, really grateful to them for everything that they gave me in my career.
Well, it sounds like you found an amazing and very comfortable fit in Yakima. Did you find that you had any issues being a Black male physician serving a predominantly white community?
Not in Yakima. And I think that really surprises people. Even in Washington State, when I tell people that I lived and worked in Yakima for 7 years, they go, oh. And I'm like, no, it's actually really, really great. I mean, Yakima is a really fascinating place. And as an anthropologist, it really bears saying that, Yakima does a lot for the world, and it was really great to be in that space. So I don't know if people know about this, but Yakima produces like 70 to 75% of the hops that the US exports around the world for its beer. So you're welcome. And it also is the largest region for apples, for growing apples in the area. And so you're welcome. And it's also got a really great flourishing wine industry as well. And so I loved Yakima actually because it reminded me of living in Rhode Island. And it's really funny because people who live in New England know exactly what I'm talking about. If a place is more than 15 minutes away, you're like, that's too far. I'm not going. And, to live in a small town where people knew each other, you could go to the local restaurant and be like, I take care of your kids. And thank you so much for serving me this meal. And we can have a conversation in community and I will see your kids on Monday. It was really cool. I loved being in that community. And I also loved that it was easy, not just to get around, but also to, build and sustain relationships. And I think that there's a lot to be said for living in small rural communities in terms of its capacity to really understand what a sustaining community means, particularly in the hardest of times. And, I worked there through the pandemic. We had no less than, 6 surges related to coronavirus. At one point, we got written about in the New York Times, and my friends from around the country were calling me, being like, are you okay? I was like, girl, we're fine. But it is surge number 3. I have to get to work, right? And so being a Black person in that area, I think the other part of that was the population of Yakima is less than 2%. But being a person of color and being a physician in a place like Yakima was really impactful for our families of color that were really struggling, particularly during that time. And I really took that responsibility very seriously. And it was a privilege to be a Black physician in that part of the world in that time that I was there.
And now you've moved your practice back to Seattle and you do a lot more with Black families. Can you speak a little bit about how that transition happened and also about the families you support now?
Yeah, that feels extremely full circle because that is like the last part of my medical school essay, which is to be able to serve people that look like me with the work that I do now. And it is so fun, with the work that I do now. As Joanna mentioned in her introduction, I'm out here doing the most with the most. And so the reason why I moved back was really to get closer to serving the population that I wanted to be in service to when I first started this journey. To be a Black physician that works with Black and brown families is such a joy. And it also means that I get to be even more of myself now than I ever have been. I work in an area, South King County, where in the world of gentrification, lots of Black and brown families have been pushed south of Seattle. And there's a lot that's happening in the healthcare space, particularly in this part of the world where people really don't have access to high quality services. And so working in a rural area and knowing that you are resource poor and that you are the resource for your community is dramatically different than working in an area where it seems like there should be a lot of resources because it's an urban area. And yet there is a gap in the capacity or ability of the population that you serve to access that resource, whether it's related to insurance or other social determinants like transportation, right? Or gas prices are too high in this area, right? And therefore, sometimes the gas is to take your child to school and back. And so working in this new area that I'm working in actually has really taught me that the challenges are exactly the same. And therefore, the solution is still that I try to be the best clinician that I can be to provide the resource to my patients who deserve it and leverage the relationships that I have in order to do that work as excellent as I possibly can. And so doing that in that area and then also doing that in Tacoma as well has been a great joy to come back home.
Well, Peter, I'm going to be using you as a resource I know here in Seattle. I feel like you've solved a lot of problems, but another thing that I appreciate is how much joy you exude in doing this job. And I'm going to ask you what may be a very difficult question. What is one thing you love about being a pediatrician?
The one thing I love, this is actually a very easy question, is that I love that I get the chance to be able to help families raise their children. It is such a joy to be a part of someone's family as a primary care physician and pediatrician, and to know that that person really cares about what you have to say because you have developed a real relationship with them. I tell people that if I am having a conversation with you about something and you and I are able to go back and forth about the plan, it means that I've done my job, that I have empowered you to be self-efficacious. And I'll never forget it. This mom, we were talking about her child that has autism and sleep. And I was like, well, this is what we could do. This is what we could do. And then she goes, but we could also do this. And I said, yes, that is a very good solution. And so I said, well, which one do you want to do? And being able to lay out the options and know that the person I'm speaking with, whether it's the parent or the adolescent, is empowered with enough information through our relationship to be able to make a choice that feels embodied and empowered is the greatest compliment. And so I am so lucky that I get to be in people's families. I'm so lucky that I get to be a part of changing lives. And I am so happy that we get to walk alongside children as they grow to help them become the best versions of themselves.
Well, Dr. Peter Asante, we are so lucky to be able to share your story today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was so much fun to do this, Joanna and David. So thank you for having me.
To hear more about Dr. Asante and to listen to other Pathways to Pediatrics, visit our website at aap.org/podcast.
Well, that's it for this special episode of Pathways to Pediatrics. If you like Pediatrics on Call, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and help us spread the word. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Pediatrics on Call.
Pediatrics on Call is a production of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our producers and editors are Ann Johnsos and Claire Keating. Our audio engineer is Doug Nagel. Joe Puskars is our associate producer, and Susan Martin is our executive producer. Our theme music was composed by Matthew Simonson. Join us next week for a special research roundup from the journal Hospital Pediatrics.
We'll talk to the editor of the journal, Dr. Pat Brady. I'm Dr. David Hill.
And I'm Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. Thanks for listening.